Hi everyone, my name is Abhiraj Garakapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Abhi.
Don't just watch the story, live it.
Logan arrived at the mine on horseback and immediately asked the workers which tunnel had collapsed. One of them pointed to the middle tunnel, explaining it was the deepest and darkest one. But Logan didn't listen for a second and rushed straight in. Inside, he used his aura to see in the darkness, and what he saw seriously disturbed him. Huge boulders were blocking the passage and a few people were desperately trying to move them. The ancient form that oversaw the mine noticed Logan's presence. Logan ordered the workers to step back. He touched one of the stones and filled it with mana. He could feel the presence of 10 trapped people, one of them carrying the same energy as Hammer. He told the foreman that they had escaped the worst of it, but there were still many victims. The foreman, completely confused, asked how he could possibly know that. Logan ignored the question and asked how long it would take to clear the rocks. The foreman estimated at least 3 days, and that instantly made Logan anxious. He knew the longer they took, the slimmer the chances of survival for the people trapped inside. Outside, Logan asked Clayton and his apprentices for help. He begged them to rescue Hammer and the trapped workers, promising they'd be rewarded handsomely. Clayton realized Logan was talking about the place where Hammer had been working. He decided to help, but made it clear it wasn't for the money. It was because people were hurt. Logan thanked him and promised to return the favor. Clayton thought it was strange that Logan, who had always been so secretive about the mine, was suddenly giving up its location just to save a slave and a few workers. He used his magic to support the tunnel, and his disciples used moonstones to summon golems. Holding their crystals, the disciples threw the stones at the rubble, and the rocks transformed into stone golems that immediately started clearing the debris. The miners were terrified. They weren't used to seeing magic that powerful. Logan was stunned by their efficiency, watching them clear several meters of rubble in just seconds. Clayton urged them to move faster, and Logan didn't just stand there watching. He joined the workers and mages, carrying rocks and helping with the removal himself. Clayton was shocked to see Logan, a noble, working so hard to save commoners and a dwarf. For him, it was a scene he had never witnessed before. Then, the master of the mine shouted that he'd found Hammer, injured and partially buried. Seeing that, Logan was terrified. But then he realized that despite the scare, the injuries were minor and everyone was okay. A huge wave of relief washed over him, and he thanked the gods that everyone had escaped with only a few scratches. Later, in the infirmary, Logan asked Hammer what had happened. Hammer admitted he had dozed off because he'd been overworking himself lately. Logan was upset, but Hammer tried to reassure him, saying he'd be back to work in no time. Logan cut him off and told him to rest for as long as he needed. Hammer was shocked by Logan's concern and shouted that he was going to rest even if the world caught fire or aliens showed up. Leaving the infirmary, Logan was impressed that the rescue had taken only 2 hours. His thoughts were interrupted by Clayton, who suddenly appeared and said that Logan's mind was something wonderful. Logan wondered if the mage had figured out his mind was full of gold and whether he'd keep it a secret. He explained to Clayton that the mine was crucial to his plans and that he had no one else to replace Hammer. Besides, if he couldn't protect his people, he'd have no one left. Clayton was intrigued by his answer and asked if Logan wanted a magic tower in his territory. The young man was stunned. Clayton explained that it was time to get rid of the old tower master and Logan's lands were perfect for a small magic tower. Logan was ecstatic and said it would be an honor. He asked if Clayton's apprentices would come and what the cost would be. Clayton replied that his disciples would definitely come and that he didn't need much money. He trusted Logan's character and abilities. Logan was completely amazed. Hammer, who had overheard the conversation, asked Clayton if he'd hit his head, but Logan just told his friend to get back to bed. A week later, Hammer reported to Logan, saying he was fully recovered and heading back to the mine to make up for lost time. Logan wished him good luck. As soon as Hammer left, Dwayne showed up looking absolutely terrifying. He demanded to know why Logan had kept the mine a secret and for how long he'd been developing it. Logan simply apologized and said he had forgotten. Frustrated, Dwayne asked how he could possibly forget something so important. Instead of answering properly, Logan broke into a huge grin and revealed the truth. it was a gold mine. Dwayne refused to believe it and told his young master to stop being a wise guy. There was no way people like them could have a gold mine, and he asked what Logan was even talking about. Logan asked what was so unbelievable about it and called him a rascal. Then, getting serious again, he informed him that the mine was expected to generate about 100 million gold per year, and asked if he really thought he'd joke about something like that. Hearing this, Dwayne went completely speechless. He asked if Logan was serious and just froze on the spot. Logan touched Dwayne, worried, and he nearly fell backward. It looks like the information was making him faint because he just couldn't process the amount of cash that mine would bring in. Elsewhere, a group of people were walking together through the forest, confused about why they'd been called back again. The dam construction was finished in just 3 months, instead of the 6 they expected. They were the administrators Dwayne had gathered for a final inspection. Logan greeted them warmly, saying how glad he was to have them there and acknowledging how tight their schedules were. He asked them to stay and witness the opening of the dam. One of the administrators looked on skeptically, thinking it was a waste of time because bringing water from the Ludder River to sprinkle over the desert wouldn't make a lick of difference. He thought Logan should have invested the money more wisely, maybe by fixing the south wall. The other administrators also questioned why Logan had put in so much effort. They turned to Dwayne, who was once again standing there with his mouth wide open. Dwayne stared at the dam, realizing it wasn't built just to water some wasteland. It was actually connected directly to the underground channels of the Ludder River. If they could supply water continuously through those channels, the vast wasteland could truly become fertile land. Logan looked around and saw that everyone was gathered: the workers, the mages, and the administrators. He turned to Clayton and gave the signal. Clayton, without a second's hesitation, got ready to start the process. Hammer grumbled, complaining that they had worked their butts off so the workers themselves could open and close the floodgates. But Logan explained that the first time had to be something huge. He wanted to show everyone on the McLean property what they had built with their own hands. An image of that dam appeared, showing some golems positioned in front of the floodgates, ready to lift them. The administrators were speechless at first, but they got used to it pretty quickly. Then Clayton shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear, giving the order for the golems to open the gates. They stretched their hands toward the gates and began to lift. Logan smiled, satisfied. But something weird happened. The golems were struggling to lift the gates. With a killer smile, Clayton looked at Hammer, muttering and asking what the hell he was doing. But Hammer looked just as confused since he had already given orders for the workers to open the gates. Seeing the situation, Logan started to sweat and had a flashback of a conversation with Clayton, where he'd warned him that lifting the gates would be too much for the golems. Apparently, the golem strength was mostly for show, and it would take about 100 workers turning the pulleys to open the gates. Thinking fast, Logan told Clayton to order the golems to knock down the gates. Hammer and Clayton were flabbergasted, and Clayton asked if he was serious. Logan just told him to do as he said since they could rebuild the gates. Later, after hesitating for a few seconds, Clayton did what Logan asked, and the golems started punching the gates. The construction crew couldn't believe what they were seeing since their hard work had just been finished. Suddenly, the gate gave way, and the water came rushing down with insane force, dragging the golems with it. Everyone was confused, but Logan just grinned from ear to ear, totally thrilled. The townspeople, who had worked so hard on the construction, couldn't hold back their tears at the sight of the water, finally understanding what it truly meant. In that moment, Logan thought this would solve their food problem during the Civil War. They could start planting next spring. Even Dwayne was happy and jumped on Logan's back, scaring the daylights out of him, saying how wrong he was about the dam and begging for forgiveness. Logan told him it was all good and started teasing him, asking why a big guy like him was crying so much, but not everyone was happy. Hammer was over in the corner crying and asking how long it would take to rebuild the gates. Clayton came over and said he'd help rebuild them one more time. Logan then said they didn't need the gate urgently, and that they could take a week off and finish the mine construction first. After that, he told Hammer that once this project was done too, they'd have. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Up High grow naturally. A long vacation again. That lit up Hammer's eyes, and he asked if Logan was serious. Logan reassured him, But what Hammer didn't know was that they'd be busy again soon. Lots of farmers would want the fertile land and they'd need to build a new village for people to live in. Logan turned to Hammer, about to praise him, but realized that wasn't the right way to do things. He called him over. Hammer turned, curious. Logan commented that construction must be tough, even for someone like him, since he'd never heard of dwarves being good at building. That drove Hammer crazy. He asked what Logan was trying to say and explained that after making weapons, construction was the dwarves' specialty. Logan realized Hammer was right where he wanted him and commented that it was great to hear that. Hammer replied that it sounded suspicious, that Logan could praise him all he wanted, but it wouldn't get him anything, and asked why he was suddenly so interested in construction. Logan played it off, saying it was just curiosity. But as soon as Hammer turned his back, Logan thought to himself that after his week of rest, the thrilling experience of home building would begin, and then he wouldn't be laughing. He was actually scared to run into him at night. As soon as the chat with Hammer was over, Logan stepped up and addressed the crowd at the inauguration. He repeated the promise he had made earlier. First, that everyone would be allowed to farm the McLean Plains. Second, that they would receive leasing rights proportional to their work, and that taxes would be capped at only 30%. Then, he glanced at the vassals, thinking that by announcing it this way, not even they could oppose it. In fact, they all looked radiant, realizing that the territory might finally be changing for real. 4 weeks later, Logan was back in his office with Rick, reviewing a plan sent by Hammer, who had already finished the village layout and even a model house. Logan commented that he knew he'd chosen the right person for the job, and Rick agreed, saying Hammer was amazing. Logan thought about how he never imagined Hammer would accept the task when he first approached him a few weeks ago. Hammer had planned the streets in a cross pattern and placed houses of the same size, complete with wells, community bathrooms, and sewers. Logan thought he had basically tried to replicate the city plan he'd seen in his past life. Suddenly, a strong smell hit Logan in the face. He turned to Rick and asked why he'd stink so bad. Rick said it was all Logan's fault, and asked why that drug was selling so insanely well, saying that if it weren't for that, he wouldn't be suffering like this. Just then, Dwayne burst into the room screaming Logan's name. Logan asked if he was ever going to knock again, but Dwayne didn't care and immediately started saying something about Hammer. Then his expression flipped into pure joy. He told Logan that Hammer had sent word they could start mining the gold Nahar now and showed him some nuggets, explaining they had found the treasure just like that. Logan told Hammer he did a great job, and Dwayne hugged him, asking how they got so lucky to have him around. But Hammer just wanted to rest, and his eyes showed he had been awake for a very, very long time. Logan then asked him how much they could start extracting. Hammer replied that everything was on schedule, and that they could pull out a ton of gold per month, which should last at least 10 years. He once again insisted that he really needed to go rest. Logan hesitated and argued that there was still so much to do, like building the city, handling more beasts, and creating new weapons. He asked Hammer if that would be possible. Logan's request hit like an axe blow, making Hammer sweat and grab his head. Then he just lay down, flat on the floor to rest. Dwayne bent over him and called him the treasure of the territory. Logan thought he'd be the only one moving forward now since there was still so much work left to do. He told Hammer he'd keep his promise and that he could take his time off. Hammer suddenly started screaming with happiness and bolted out like a flash of lightning. Logan wondered if he'd awakened some kind of power because the dwarf was way too fast. Behind him, Dwayne started crying with joy. Logan asked what happened, and Dwayne explained that the mine would bring in about 100 million gold a year. Dwayne told Logan to hell with the Chirus, and that their territory was saved because they wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. Logan teased him, saying he was crying more than when the dam was finished. Then the young man looked calmly at Dwayne and dropped a crucial fact. He told him that the only one he should fear was him and warned him to stay sharp because that mind was also his. Dwayne was instantly terrified. Logan explained that of course he'd pay 30% in taxes to the family, but that was it. Dwayne got up, completely bewildered, and knelt before Logan, saying he trusted his judgment. Logan then warned Dwayne that they had to keep the mine a secret because if word got out, the Bofros, Kelia, and the Margrave would cause trouble. Dwayne said he'd take care of it, which made Dwayne feel a bit uneasy. He thought his father was going to be a real handful since he had made a lot of changes before Patrick's return. A week later, Logan and his father were walking by the river, admiring how beautiful the place had become. Logan noticed right away that his father had become an advanced knight. Patrick acknowledged that while Logan had been away, he had managed to accomplish a ridiculous amount. Logan tried to defend himself and explain his plans, but Patrick cut him off mid-sentence. Patrick said that having water flowing through that wasteland was insane, in the best way possible, and that Logan was way better at managing the territory than he ever was. Logan tried to stay humble, but Patrick kept going, saying Logan had managed to do more in just 3 months than he himself had done in the last 10 years, and then straight up thanked him for it. Logan wanted to say he was grateful too, but Patrick interrupted him again and dropped another bomb. He announced that from now on, Logan would handle all the duties of a lord because he wanted to focus entirely on training the Order of Knights. Hearing that, Logan was completely stunned. Patrick cut him off again before he could react and asked if he knew what he had realized during his training. Then he said it bluntly, "I got old." Patrick explained that he couldn't master the secret techniques anymore, and that now it was up to young people like Logan and Ronan to try. He said Logan had helped him break through a barrier that had blocked him for years, and that he now wanted to step back and become a guide instead of staying in the front. Logan nodded and accepted the proposal. Patrick then turned and called for Marion, asking her to help Logan fulfill his role. Marion agreed without hesitation. Patrick gave Logan a small nudge clearly, encouraging him to talk to his mother. The young men walked up to Marion, who was standing there in a beautiful dress, holding a parasol. She started by saying that Logan's achievements were more than enough to prove his ability to be the successor. She called him young master and said that now she only wished for Ronan's success. Logan tried to apologize, but she interrupted him, saying she was the one who should be sorry. She admitted her vision had been limited and said she hoped Logan would be generous. Marion continued, saying that Logan had been teaching Ronan how to fight and that he had never been happier. She asked him to continue looking after his brother. Logan didn't like where this conversation was heading at all, and suddenly shouted that parents shouldn't use respectful titles with their children. He told her to call him mom instead. That made her stop completely emotional. She turned and said goodbye, then walked toward Patrick. Patrick signaled to Logan, clearly approving of what his son had just done. Logan stood there and watched his parents walk away. Later on, Logan and Patrick were talking again. Logan explained that as soon as the city was fully ready, they would start clearing the brush to prepare the land for farming. Patrick looked a little concerned and asked whether the residents would really move that easily. Logan replied confidently that they would, because anyone who moved to the new city would get priority rights and the new houses would be much better than what they currently had. He also informed Patrick that he had already asked Dwayne to start recruiting soldiers, and Patrick agreed, saying he would personally train those who showed potential to become knights. Patrick praised Logan's work, but then said there was still one problem. He turned around and stopped in front of the Knights of the Order, calling them lost causes. He asked since when they had 2 separate knight orders. Logan immediately recognized them as the knights who had deserted from Tesseran. They were acting like they were on opposing sides. Patrick commented that while he and Logan had been killing themselves training, the knights were busy fighting like children, and he admitted that it was his fault for being negligent. The knights shouted back, saying that wasn't true, and demanded that Captain Hinckley take them away. Hinckley turned his head toward Patrick and asked cheerfully whether he had become an advanced level knight. Patrick answered that he was going to straighten them out. Then, releasing an overwhelming amount of aura, he shattered a wooden sword and shouted for them to feel it and learn the art of the sword first hand. Meanwhile, in the office, Dwayne was signing documents, happier than he had been in a long time now that he didn't have to constantly worry about the budget. 2 vassals were talking about how Logan was monopolizing the funds, but Dwayne cut them off, asking if the extra money had blinded them and where they thought it even came from, telling them to just obey orders. As he read another document, he suddenly started sweating. A few minutes later, he rushed into Logan's office and asked what he planned to do with 10 million gold. Logan calmly replied that he was going to buy 100 kilograms of mithril. Dwayne's jaw dropped and Logan shoved him against the wall and told him to sign the papers. Dwayne protested, saying he couldn't because mithril was 1,000 times more expensive than gold. The scene shifts to a conversation between Logan and Philip. Logan explained that he wanted to buy Mithril for the knight's war gear, but Philip immediately said it was impossible. Logan was stunned. Philip explained that Mithril wasn't something you could buy just because you had money, but something you needed power and influence to obtain. That explanation gave Logan an idea. Inside a castle, a messenger was disturbed by a message coming from McLean. Duke Felix, who was busy, arrived 30 minutes later to check it. Felix greeted Logan warmly and said he had missed hearing from him. Logan replied that he would never dare to send a personal message. Felix smiled and revealed, "Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps Amazing Apai grow naturally." That his wife was pregnant and that it was all thanks to Logan. Logan congratulated him and Felix thanked him in return. Felix added that when the baby was born, he wanted Logan to come back to the capital because his wife wanted to thank him personally, and he also promised to teach Logan his next technique. Logan thanked him sincerely. Felix then asked for the real reason behind the contact. Logan didn't beat around the bush and asked whether he could obtain the 100 kilograms of mithril he needed. Felix's jaw dropped and he asked if Logan had really said 100 kilograms and not 100 grams. Felix commented that he didn't even spend that much on his own parties and said he had underestimated Logan's generosity. Felix then said he would take care of everything, but on one condition: Logan had to attend the baby's celebration and call him master. Logan stared at the now empty communication sphere, then suddenly shivered before letting out a cry of pure happiness. Becoming a disciple of the Sword Duke was the most incredible thing that had ever happened to him. He had only planned to ask for a bit of help, but Felix had handed him a golden rope instead. Logan then thought that Hammer would probably be more productive after a short break and bragged to himself about how benevolent he was as an employer. In reality, Hammer had nightmares about Logan for weeks after getting that vacation. On the outskirts of McLean Castle, a group of young men, all under the age of 20, gathered for recruitment. Watching them, Dwayne asked Logan whether he really needed to recruit this many people. Logan replied that he would handle everything himself. In his mind, expanding their forces was absolutely necessary and he intended to personally select the recruits, even if that approach came with certain disadvantages. He reflected on the Empire's new military theory, which claimed that what truly mattered wasn't physical strength, but the senses. According to that doctrine, the Empire had once used 50,000 knights to crush neighboring countries. Thinking 9 years ahead, Logan believed that once they gathered all existing soldiers and reselected them, they could form a proper knight unit. The upcoming Grandia civil war would be difficult, but with proper preparation, they would still have a formidable force when the Empire eventually invaded. Heath admitted to himself that he would have preferred to recruit people over 20 as well, but if he did that, there wouldn't be enough manpower left for constructing the city. One of the vassals shouted at the boys to quiet down. Logan then asked how soldiers had traditionally been selected in the past. The vassal explained that everyone was made to run, and they simply chose candidates based on the order in which they finished. Logan immediately realized how crude that method was. He issued new instructions, ordering them to select only those with good eyesight, sharp hearing, and quick reflexes. The first test he devised required the candidates to walk toward an image until they could see it clearly. Some of them stopped quite early, and one boy confidently announced that the picture was of a chicken. Logan told the knights to take note of the kid who had just called him handsome. From the back, another boy raised his hand and said that, judging by the comb, it had to be a rooster. Logan was impressed by that observation. For the second test, Dwayne repeatedly shouted the same word over and over, while the participants were instructed to move forward only once they understood the word clearly. One boy suddenly shouted back at Dwayne, saying the answer was the world's. Sparrow then added that Dwayne had also called him a son of a bad, and asked whether that was part of the test too. Dwayne panicked, convinced he had been muttering to himself. Logan calmly told Dwayne to select that boy immediately and added that he also needed a beating. Later, while reviewing the documents, Logan could hardly believe his eyes. 250 people had passed with flying colors. He started thinking bigger, deciding that he would select around 500 people without holding back. with the ultimate goal of forming a force of 1,000. At the training grounds, Victor was practicing with his sword. He swung the blade with raw force, drawing the attention of nearby knights. All Victor could think about were Logan's words. If he could perform the sword technique 1,000 times without making a single mistake, he could become a knight and awaken his inner strength. Gripping the hilt tightly, he told himself that he needed to become a knight as soon as possible. Nearby, his sister Victoria watched him with concern. At that moment, Victoria noticed Logan approaching. He gestured for her to stay quiet, explaining that he wanted to check on Victor. Watching closely, Logan thought Victor had a great deal of talent. Even though his swings were wild, his basic stance remained solid. Logan called out to Victor and told him that the next day, he would be leaving the McLean Castle territory to train soldiers in the Tesseran region, a mission that would last until winter. He invited Victor to come along. Victor immediately asked whether he could bring his sister with him. Logan questioned whether it was really a good idea to bring his sister to a training camp full of men, but Victor insisted loudly that it was fine. Logan let out a sigh and agreed, telling Victor that Victoria could come, but warning him by pointing a finger that if any trouble occurred, it would be entirely his responsibility. Victor replied firmly that he would take very good care of his sister. Logan then asked whether Victoria was really that precious to him. Victor hesitated, then finally let everything spill out. He'd explained that his parents had died because of him and that Rhea was left without parents because of him as well. Because of that, he felt it was his duty to protect her no matter what. Logan looked at him silently for a moment, then placed a hand on Victor's shoulder and told him that it was okay and that he should keep up the good work. A few days later at Tesseran Castle, Kaisalan was putting the kids Logan had selected through brutal training. He ordered them to run 5 laps around the wall, announcing that the last 100 would have to run 2 extra laps. As punishment, terror spread across the recruits' faces, but Kaisalan shouted at them to stop messing around and start running. Watching this, Logan complimented Kaisalan, saying he had a natural talent for being a sergeant. Kaisalan replied that since he was being treated like a knight, he had agreed to renew his contract. Lowering his voice, he whispered into Logan's ear, asking whether he was planning to start some kind of war within the next 2 years. Logan simply smiled without answering, but Kaisalan already knew that war was inevitable. Their attention was suddenly pulled away when one of the recruits shouted that someone was a monster. They were talking about Victor, who was running far ahead of everyone else and leading the race. The others were stunned. One of them asked what Victor was made of, and another replied that Victor was Logan's slave. Hearing that, the first boy felt his fighting spirit ignite and started running again, shouting that he wouldn't lose to Victor. Kaisalan immediately noticed what Logan often called the winner effect. Logan commented that he didn't expect exceptional physical abilities from the recruits, but the will to never give up was enough. He believed Victor would naturally absorb strength from this role, and that his awakening would come soon, turning him into the greatest motivator among the soldiers. After the run, the kids were taken to the barracks, where long tables filled with food awaited them. They ate heartily and thanked Logan for the meal. Rhea was also there, helping serve food. The boys were completely mesmerized by her beauty, and one of them even called her an angel. Victor noticed their gazes immediately and released a threatening aura. Pointing at them, he warned them to look away before he gouged their eyes out. The boys fell silent instantly. However, one apprentice sitting behind Victor continued staring at Rhea with a lecherous expression. Later that night, Victor burst out of the barracks with a piece of bread still in his hand. He had asked an older woman where Rhea had gone, and she told him that Rhea had taken the back door to throw out the trash. Anxiety flooded Victor's mind. Rhea shouldn't have been alone at night. Hearing strange noises from a nearby alley, he rushed toward the sound. What he saw froze him in place. The apprentice with a lecherous stare was trying to take advantage of Rhea. Tears streamed down her face. The rookie tried to stammer an excuse, but Victor was already moving. He drove a powerful knee into the man's face, shattering his nose and slamming him to the ground. Standing protectively in front of Rhea, Victor prepared to strike again. The apprentice spat blood and called Victor a bastard, demanding to know how a mere slave dared to touch him. Victor answered with another brutal blow, nearly knocking him unconscious. Rhea's frozen in place, as Victor grabbed the man by the hair and began beating him, relentlessly, snarling for him to die. Around the corner, Another apprentice witnessed the scene and, before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Up High grow naturally. Ran to get help. Victor saw nothing but red. Each punch brought back memories of the night he and Rhea lost their parents. Suddenly, a voice shouted from behind, snapping him out of his rage. Victor turned and saw Logan standing there. Logan ordered him to get a grip and look around. A maid quickly arrived and gently led Rhea away. Kaiserlin struggled to process the chaos unfolding before him. Logan calmly pointed at the lifeless body on the ground and told Kaiserlin to handle it. Victor lowered his head, waiting for punishment, and apologized. Logan asked whether he regretted his actions. Victor answered that he didn't, but he apologized for killing one of Logan's soldiers without permission. Logan acknowledged that Victor wasn't entirely wrong, but pointed out that what he truly should regret was bringing his sister to the camp. He explained that Victor's stubbornness had nearly gotten Rhea hurt. Logan told him that it was better to leave loved ones in safe places rather than dragging them into danger. He admitted that he had allowed Victor to bring Rhea, so that Victor could learn the consequences of his choices. Logan asked whether he understood the lesson, and Victor nodded silently. Logan then told Victor that while killing was a crime, Rhea had been a victim, and Victor had done well to protect her. However, he warned him that next time he must ask for permission before taking such drastic action. Logan didn't want future nights delayed because of some filthy pervert. Inside the castle, Logan and Kaiserlin spoke at length. Kaiserlin questioned whether Logan should really be deciding such matters on his own. Logan replied that Victor was his property and that he had simply used him to rid the world of a disgusting criminal. He refrains it by saying he had used his property to eliminate a criminal, and asked Kaiserlin what he thought of that version of the story. Kaiserlin asked whether Victor had killed the recruit under Logan's orders. Logan nodded and laid out his plan. The apprentice's crimes would be exposed and his corpse would be hung from the castle gates as a warning. Logan instructed Kaiserlin to inform the soldiers. Changing the subject, Kaiserlin noticed Logan marking something on a map and asked what he was doing. Logan replied that it was a surprise. The markings highlighted areas where monsters had recently been spotted. News of Victor's actions spread quickly. When people learned what the dead recruit had intended to do to Rhea, shock turned into rage. Many wanted to dig up the body and kill him again. Logan listened to the conversations and thought that the situation had resolved itself quite nicely. 3 months later, snow covered the trees, signaling the arrival of winter. Logan and Kaiserlin stood together, observing the frozen landscape. Logan remarked that the new year was approaching, and Kaiserlin reflected on how quickly time had passed. Out of the original 1,000 apprentices, only 987 remain after 90 days of training, with 1 death and 12 dropouts. Kaiserlin was satisfied, noting that no one else had quit. Logan concluded that basic training was finally complete. He mentioned that he had already ordered Hammer to produce 400 more crossbows. Logan then asked whether the apprentices were ready for combat training. Patrick confirmed they were and suggested the forest at the base of the mountain range as the perfect location. He said it was time to advance their training as the knights needed real combat experience. Logan asked whether they had mastered the Iron Bloodsword technique. Patrick replied that true mastery could only be achieved through battle. Logan's smile widened, carrying a distinctly psychotic edge, and he agreed. Seeing the terrifying expressions shared by father and son, Kaiserlin turned pale as a bead of sweat slid down his face. In that moment, he finally understood where Logan had inherited his intense, slightly unhinged nature from. A few days later, deep within the southern Man Mountain range, Patrick stood fully armored, his presence commanding absolute focus. He ordered the knights to draw their swords and regulate their breathing. As they steadied themselves, they focused their aura, and at Patrick's signal, they struck the massive trees before them. The impact was overwhelming. Even the knights themselves were stunned by the sheer power they had unleashed. Standing beside his father, Logan watched with quiet satisfaction, while Patrick remained calm and composed, as if this result was expected. The apprentices, however, were completely fired up. They whispered excitedly among themselves, wondering if they would ever reach such a level. Logan quickly shouted at them to stay alert, reminding everyone that this wasn't an ordinary forest, but a monster-infested one. Almost on cue, goblins began crawling out from the shadows. The knights didn't hesitate for even a second. They charged forward, cutting through the goblins with ruthless precision, striking like a raging storm. Completely overwhelmed, the goblins panicked and tried to flee. Logan had already anticipated that. He immediately ordered the troops to prepare their crossbows. At his command, a rain of bolts fell across the battlefield, wiping out any goblin that attempted to escape. The cavalry laughed loudly, mocking the fear they once had of such creatures. That confidence didn't last long. A massive, terrifying paw slammed into view, instantly killing the laughter. The knights, tensed as a pack of wolves, charged forward, but these weren't ordinary beasts. They were horned wolves. The knights quickly formed a defensive line, and the blink of an eye, one of the wolves clamped its jaws around a knight's sword, shocking everyone. The situation became tense immediately. Kaiselan reacted fast, ordering the cavalry to fire their crossbows again. Arrows tore through the air and struck the wolves, drawing out agonizing screams. But the bolts shattered on impact, completely ineffective. One soldier trembled as he shouted that the arrows weren't working. Logan yelled for everyone to hold formation. The order was clear. Not a single wolf was allowed to break through. Victor leaped forward, determined to test himself. His strike was powerful enough to send a wolf flying several meters back. But before he could react, a blood-curdling scream rang out behind him. Turning around, he saw a wolf biting into a recruit's leg, while another apprentice stood frozen in terror. A blazing strike cut through the battlefield as Logan unleashed his fury, killing the wolf in a single blow. He shouted at the terrified apprentice to snap out of it and get the wounded to safety. The recruiter obeyed instantly and ran. Logan observed the battlefield and realized his suspicion had been right. Most of the apprentices weren't ready for chaotic combat. However, those who ranked within the top 100 in the census test were clearly different. One apprentice, cornered, noticed another wolf creeping in from behind. Before it could strike, Victor appeared out of nowhere and slit the beast's throat. He looked down at his blood-soaked blade, a faint smile forming on his face. The other apprentices stared at him in shock. Watching this, Logan realized that Victor had finally broken past his limits. The fight was nearing its end. Patrick personally brought down the final wolf. Logan asked the captain if that was all of them, and the captain confirmed it. Patrick remarked that it had already been a month and a half since combat training began, yet clearing all these locations had taken far longer than expected. The captain agreed, explaining that discovering 3 cities infested with thousands of monsters was no small matter. If those monsters had invaded the castle all at once, the damage would have been catastrophic. He silently thanked fate that they had discovered the threats in time. Logan continued coordinating the knights and soldiers, urging them to endure just a little longer. He ordered them to finish cutting down a massive tree trunk and transport it to the construction site. The knights complained, grumbling about fighting monsters and chopping trees non-stop, without a single break. Logan ignored them completely and commented on how ridiculous it was that such valuable trees had been left untouched just because monsters lived nearby. With his usual killer smile, he thought the situation was perfect. He was training soldiers and gathering construction materials at the same time. Patrick observed everything quietly and thought that Logan seemed more interested in harvesting wood than in the training itself. Logan, meanwhile, wondered if awakening true strength required something beyond technique, perhaps a sixth sense or a raw survival instinct. If everything went according to plan during the grandiose civil war, they could rapidly reinforce their forces before the inevitable conflict with the Empire. Hammer noticed the strange smile on Logan's face and asked what was so amusing. Logan ignored the question and shifted the topic, sighing that once they gathered enough wood, construction of McLean Town could finally move forward. He asked Hammer if he could complete the project on time. Hammer nodded confidently, explaining that with the mage's support and the workers' motivation, it was entirely doable. Logan wondered if Hammer had always been this dependable and quietly credited it to the vacation he had forced on him. Just as Hammer's confidence peaked, Logan casually reminded him of another task, the magic tower. At that moment, Clayton cast a spell, raising a massive wall of earth from the ground. The workers stared in stunned silence. Logan snapped them out of it, telling them to stop gawking and start collecting the soil as planned. He then approached Clayton and thanked him for honoring his requests. Clayton waved it off, saying that with an annual support fund of 10 million gold, it hardly mattered whether the place was just a small town. If things went smoothly, the city would eventually become the center of the entire region. Logan cut him off, stating that his only goal was to create a peaceful place where people could live comfortably. Clayton was taken aback and loudly declared that McLean was truly a territory for the people, dramatically announcing that Logan had his vote. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Appy. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.